Start. Some of you who are still joining us, please take your seats. My name is Reinis Zitmanis, and I will moderate today's event. Good to see you all here. It's an early morning, but we still have to warm up and start. May I remind you before the event that you should reach for your cell phones and find those little buttons and knobs just to turn the sound off, just in case you haven't done so by this time. Regarding Wi-Fi, on this page on the opposite side at the bottom there is a Wi-Fi codes printed so you can access the network if you wish to send some emails, or better, you could also ask some questions to the speakers and tweet by using this hashtag OpenEU2015. Please join the Twitter conversations, share your experiences, take photos, take notes, and the remarks by our speakers, which today we have very special ones with very good presentations, and I'm keen to see them. And by the way, you also received a questionnaire which I would like you to fill up by the end of the event or by the end of the first session, and just return them to the reception. It would be very nice and kind of you. Okay, but now I would like to give a stage and expect you to give a warmest applause you could possibly make this morning. Please welcome host Jānis Treis, Chairman of the Board, Latvian Open Technology Association. Please welcome.
Good morning, dear friends, and welcome to 8th Conference of Latvian Open Technology Association, or LATA in Latvian. One may say it's already 8th conference, so no big deal, it's a routine thing, but this is a very special conference because this is a presidency year for Latvia in European Council, and one of priorities of presidency are digital priority. So this is very special for us, and LATA is taking part in the activities, and this event is co-financed by Latvian state, and this event is in official calendar of the presidency. Yesterday there was an expert panel discussion in Jelgava, and some of the experts will also give presentations today. But yesterday they looked at various aspects of open data, not only technical but also legal and even philosophical aspects of open data, and this was very interesting. Also, experts looked at democracy process and how does the process can benefit from using of technology, and experts shared experience between them about situation in different countries, EU and Switzerland. I think this is the right moment to say thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, our sponsors, our main sponsor, La Telecom, which has been sponsoring our event for several years, and IBM, which is sponsoring, I believe, all the conferences LATA had, and technology company DPA. Also, I would like to thank you, co-organizers of this event, and namely Mana Balss LV and Providus. They helped a lot in yesterday's event. Also, I would like to thank Latvian University, which allows us to be here in Great Aula, and personally, Dean of Faculty of Computer Sciences, Mr. Juris Borzovs. And of course, this event wouldn't be possible without organizing team, and we have the greatest team of the world to ladies, Madara Greiziņa-Kuzmina and Ieva Vītoliņa. Thank you, ladies. So that's enough for me, and now I would like to give a floor Deputy State Secretary of Foreign Ministry, Ms. Inga Skujiņa. Please.
Good morning. It is a great honor to be among you here today, but I would say that my pleasure and happiness is even greater than honor, probably, and I can tell you why. Because back in 2012, when we started preparations of Latvia's first presidency of the Council of the European Union, just very few could imagine that digital Europe would be defined as one of our priorities, one of three main priorities of the Latvian presidency. And I can tell you that we received those days a lot of skepticism and criticism that this priority could be realistic. Then, step by step, slowly, engaging broader public in a number of discussions, open discussions, then afterwards involving professional associations in further discussions on Latvian priorities for the presidency, including Latvian Open Technology Association, people started to believe. The rest. So, because the core, there always had been a core which was confident that this is an important issue. So, but step by step, I think we managed to convince more and more people in Latvia and also in other countries and European institutions. Today, this is almost the second month of our presidency, and I'm really happy that it's working. We did it. It's working, and Digital Europe is one of our three priorities. Another important thing that this is not the only and one priority which focuses on digital issues. Other two, competitive Europe and engaged Europe, are also horizontal ones, and I think we cannot imagine those without digital themes and issues to be addressed. I think that all three are priorities, and especially Digital Europe, that speaks about and covers many issues, are essential, important ones, so that Europe would regain its leading role in a digital world. And to achieve that, I think it is important for us here in Latvia and also other countries in different institutions around the world, especially in Europe, that we have to change our mindset. We have to change our approach to different areas, issues we are developing policy-wise within the European Union. And again, I'm positive here. I think we're on the right track, because in recent discussions with the European Commission and other international institutions, we clearly feel that there is an understanding that so-called principle digital by default is an important one and should be incorporated in all the policies, in future policies of the European Union. So this becomes more and more common understanding. Another important step or fact to be mentioned that I think we are on the right track and we are shaping and designing our future, that also the Commission, the European Commission, has come out with new plans emphasizing or outlining how to promote digital single market. And also in coming months, namely in April, we're expecting a new strategy of the European Commission, again on digital issues, so-called digital strategy. What it means for us, for Latvia, for all of you and association, it means that we're not alone and we can reach better results working together. If the Commission is with us, if other international institutions are with us, then altogether I think that we can achieve more than just working alone. Another point, when it comes to Latvia and to our region, I think that we are champions and in digital issues, and this has been also widely recognized within the European Union. This has been recognized on other forums, and I think we should speak loud and we should promote spread of information about how e-signature project works, not only in Latvia but also in the Baltic region, and I think we have a good potential to also make it work or make it happen to link us with our neighbors across the Baltic Sea, so Scandinavian countries. So Mana Balss is a fantastic example how one tiny tool, instrument, turns into a project of the state importance. So we have good examples, we have good ideas, and we have to speak about them, and we have to encourage others, also in other countries of the European Union, to work with us, to cooperate and to go further. And I think that we will have a good possibility for that, because on 17th, 18th of June, digital assembly will take place in Riga. There are many people involved and working hard. I'm happy here to tell you that there is a very close cooperation between state institutions and professional associations, including LATA, which has been one of the leading organizations also behind defining our priority of the presidency, as I already mentioned, Digital Europe. So I think that taking into account the effort and knowledge, experience that has been already contributed to this process, I think we will have a really productive and important assembly here in Riga later this year. And also, well, I have been positive and telling positive examples and really trying to outline that that we have again positive future for what is going to be discussed here. But we shouldn't forget that data issues are also challenging ones, because these days was what happened in January in Paris, now in Copenhagen, terrorism issues, counterterrorism issues, or to be more precise, terror attacks and counterterrorism issues. So more than ever have underlined the challenges and how to find the right balance between access to data and cybersecurity, how to use data, how to protect data. And along with digital single market, I think that finding the right balance between these two directions or passes, I think this is still remains challenge. I'm not using the word problem, no, not at all, but challenge, how to address and how to move forward. I will stop here, and again, I'm really grateful to Lotta and all the professionals that we had from, in my understanding and from my perspective, very good cooperation while preparing Latvian presidency. We have defined our priority, we have succeeded, and I think that we have a good potential also to have good results. I wish you successful discussions, and thank you.
A big thanks to Jānis and Inga, and may I also inform you that this event is also streamed live on Delphi, LATE, and LSM websites. Today's topic, as Inga mentioned, is also a challenging one. Open data for open society. Are we yet an open society to embrace all of this? And there are differences, open data, public domain data, and we have several issues, as she mentioned, ownership rights, copyright rights, security and privacy issues, and this poses some challenges for the governmental institutions to open the data, and standards, technology issues, but big potential for the businesses and rather big money for our economy. So let us start with the first speaker, and I want you to welcome on the stage Georg Hittmeier. Please welcome here, a warm applause. And Georg is a lawyer and a member of PSI Alliance, and you can find your presentation here.
Hope so.
Yeah, this one. Okay. Do we have a mouse? Yeah, we should go to this one. Yeah.
This?
Mm-hmm. No touch screen. Okay. And press this button. And off you go. Yes, one more.
Yeah. Good morning. My name is Georg Hittmeier. I'm a representative of the PSI Alliance, which is an association of PSI reusers, commercial PSI reusers, who have one thing in common. Oops. So? No? No? How to?
Okay, the big one? Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
This one. Okay.
We are all waiting for the new oil. For the new oil, Neelie Kroes promised us in 2012, and this summer at the 18th of July it should arrive. These are the data, which are the new oil for the digital economy. Why are we waiting? We are already reusers, and what's the purpose for us? Well, maybe I should explain it to you in one example. I'm personally working for the Kompass Verlag. We are reusers since 1867. We are a publishing house. We published address books and publish databases now. And for publishing these things, we always used public sector information. We used the commercial register since 1867. But things changed, and in the digital age, public administrations started to defend their data. They began to see the register data and other public data as a source of income, and started to maximize their access fees. Transparency isn't that topic for them, and the Directive 2003 didn't really change the situation, as the public sector bodies are not obliged to release their data. It's on a voluntarily basis at the moment. So what should happen in July? The new directive should be implemented, and all accessible documents will be available for reuse at marginal cost. That's the plan. Therefore, additional data value chains will emerge, and all the intermediaries in these data value chains will create various information products, and information products will be designed according to the needs of the other players in those markets. And why? What were the targets of the European Union when they started to create this directive? The most important thing is economic growth. That was the main trigger to start the PSI directive. Oops. The change to the digital society is also a main target. Job creation for small emerging companies is closely connected to economic growth. New services that should be provided by these new emerging companies. The feedback from the reusers according to the data the public administrations provide is important for improvement of these data. Transparency is also an important aim, and that comes more from the open data perspective, less from the PSI. And the whole thing started in 1998 when one saw that the Paperwork Reduction Act in the US had very good results. So it's also a topic of competitiveness. The main provisions, it's the general principle: accessible documents are generally reusable and at marginal costs. The other provisions didn't change very much. They are as they were in the Directive 2003. Only cultural institutions are also included in this framework. So let's see, what's the business case for the member states? It's a business for them, and it starts with an investment. The member states will lose access fees if they implement the new directive. That's a fact nobody can deny. But as reuse is rather price sensitive and the marginal cost principle reduces the prices, the private companies will make business out of it, and the private sector will generate revenues. And due to this fact, the private sector has to pay taxes. So the public sector has additional tax income out of corporate taxation gains. And if you net it up, the curve changes and it goes close to zero on the long run. But there is another effect. To create those revenues, you need to create jobs first. And those jobs will also force and will also result in income for the public administrations, as income tax and social security contributions will be the gains. And if you net it up again, you see, on the long run, it's a win situation for the public administrations, but not on the short run, and that's the problem. And when you look at the faces, at the income faces, it's quite obvious that you need to invest that the member states need to invest before they can harvest. And that's what they don't do at the moment. That's what will take a certain time. Let's hope it happens. Is there any evidence for that, what I say? Well, there is. The European Union has many studies. Many studies took place before this directive went into force, and so it started in the year 2000, and it's in the year 2006 and 2011. There is evidence enough that these things work out of these studies. But the main evidence, and that's what I said before, it's in the US it works, and that was the main impetus that the European Union started with this program and started to open up data, to release data, and to discuss this with the member states. So it's evident, but it costs on the short run, and the current situation is it doesn't happen. When you look at the situation in the member states, you don't feel that they are really opening up their data. They all defend their revenues. Public sector bodies fear to lose money. The change of culture didn't take place that quickly as we hoped it will happen. And the investment doesn't take place. And, well, therefore, the oil won't come per train. I think we've got to drill some rock layers first, that we find our new oil. And let's see the situation from another perspective now, from a startup's perspective. A small company that has to invest now into this new possibility. Because data are opening up in July, and it's time to step into it. And such a startup company usually has a marketing plan with this famous piece, its product, its pricing, its placement, and its promotion. So let's go to product. Up to now, it's unclear which data will be released in July when the public sector bodies defend their data. You always hear about privacy concerns, especially when it comes to registered data. The public sector bodies already sell on an access base. For this startup company, it cannot be really identified which data will be available in the next time. So it's not a very good start to define a product. Pricing, it's always a matter of pricing as the public sector bodies defend their income. And when you build up a new business case and you don't know exactly how much the resources will cost, it's quite difficult to define your own pricing. And if it gets cheaper, explain your customers why the thing is changing so quickly. You can't build up a business on this. And it's a pity. Placement. If public sector bodies charge for their data, it will be expectable that licensing terms like no reselling will be very popular, so that your business case is also not so exactly to define. But in the directive, we've got a clause that you can do redress when a decision is not compliant to the directive. Well, in some member states, the civil courts are competent for those redress procedure. In this case, it will take 2 to 3 years till you come to a final decision, and you've got to risk quite some money for the court fees. Well, that's not a situation for a startup company. You can't start. You can't start if it's unclear which product, how it's priced, whom are you allowed to sell, and if you want to go into a redress procedure, it takes you 3 years. That's not the ecosystem for a startup. That's impossible. So the question is, will it be the same thing with the old, like with the old oil? Because there's also, it's a matter of competitiveness. And in the old oil business, the US is quite good at the moment. Well, the question is also, why did Nelly Kroes promise this to us, that we will receive new oil this year? Well, maybe we should have listened to her a bit longer than we did. It wasn't just this sentence that she said in 2012. She also said every level of every public administration has to see the benefits of opening up. And I think that's the main aim we have to follow, that we see the benefits and that the member states are going to invest, and it's a decision on a high political level that it's an investment. You can't blame a public sector body for not investing if nobody tells him how he could compensate the losses of excess fees. It's a political decision to step into opening up data. And on a European level, this decision was made, and we hope that also on a national level, this will take place, and we all will have the benefits out of opening data in the future. Thank you.
Great. Would you please raise your hands and start asking some questions to Georg? I know it's an early morning, but there were a couple of interesting things I just heard. I have my questions. Do you have yours? Okay. So they're not very waking up. Right. But I will ask you one tough one. I'm very sorry, but you mentioned one point that organizations started to defend their data, and in July. And even if the governments embrace the directives, there are state-owned, semi-private, semi-public companies, municipality-owned companies, and some of them hold the most valuable data for the business. But the legislation for them and this directive for them could be some sort of a gray area. And this July might not ring a bell for such an organizations. Can you elaborate on that? And maybe give some insight also, do you have any issues or success stories in Austria?
Charging for...
opening up first, defending, or not allowing to resell?
There is an exception to the marginal cost principle in the directive. It's Article 6.2. And public sector bodies that have to create substantial income from selling their data are allowed to charge according to the cost recovery principle. So that's the same principle as it's now.
So they will somehow get their money back, which they invested, because...
yeah, get their money back, but they have to do it on a net cost principle. So if they have other income resulting from this data, they have to take it into account. For example, let's see a register, commercial register. They would lose excess fees, but often they have great income from registry fees. And this income has to be taken into account. That's a decision of the EFTA Court of 2013, and it's often forgotten. So in reality, very often, the fees allowed for reuse would be around zero. And that's the situation right now in the current directive as well. And that's violated very often.
Can you compare or tell us how does maybe Austria looks like comparing to another European countries? Are you keen to embrace them faster than other countries do?
In Austria, we've got the situation that on one hand, we've got a quite impressive open data movement, and we've got, for example, the Chancellery supporting this open data movement. We've got a good platform, we've got standard licensing terms, but it's only for the willful ones who do it voluntarily. On the other hand, we've got those valuable data like land register, commercial register, craft and trade register, all the data from the surveying office, and these are not freely available, and they make great profit out of it. So it's 4 days ago there was a newspaper article saying that the profit of the land register in total is about 250 million.
Yeah, but you can't resell this information, so the startups in that sense are not able to resell or reuse this data and somehow disrupt the current business.
Well, it's not possible at the moment. We've got a law case going on for a certain year against the Ministry of Justice regarding commercial register data. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Please do not hesitate to ask them on Twitter as well. Please use hashtag OpenEU2015. Big thanks to Georg Hidmer. Yes, big one, please. Yes, now it sounds better. Okay. May I also, Inga Skuiņa, the Deputy State Secretary, is very currently also, she might need it to hear this open data chancellery. Sounds very good and reasonable to push these values from inside as well. Right, but now I would like to welcome Joonas Pekkanen from Finland. Please join us on stage. Joonas is chairman of our Ministerio, or Open Ministry. There is an Open Ministry in Finland, right? Okay, we don't have such, so yes, it would be very great if you could share your experiences.
Yes, just a second.
Okay, yeah, you need to find the mouse and put it in the next screen, and then, okay, you can maximize up a little bit the window if you like.
Where do I have the mouse?
The mouse has to go into the right side. Yeah, a little. Okay. Yes, thank you. Okay. Good.
Perfect. So my name is Joonas Pekkanen. There's two sides to my presentation. The first one, first half, kind of ties into yesterday's part of this event and the citizen participation that we have in Finland with the Citizens Initiative now being in place since 2012. Some challenges that we have. Hold on, let me just. I think I need to refresh. Okay. Now I have the right version. So my day job is at the Forum Virium Helsinki, which is a Helsinki city-owned company that deals with open data and smart city issues. For example, this Saturday we are arranging on the International Open Data Day a hackathon with civil society hackers and other startup and developers to put together some new interesting services. But mostly Forum Virim Helsinki works on EU projects and other publicly funded projects together with different parts of the Helsinki city. I'm also active in the Open Knowledge movement, founding member of Open Knowledge Finland, the local chapter, and various projects. Also the Open Government Partnership, which Finland joined a few years ago. We're now, I'm on the National Committee as a civil society representative. And a large part of that Open Government Action Plan in Finland contains open data related points. Open Ministry, as mentioned in the introduction, is a civil society organization that's designed to help any civil society organizations and citizens who want to use the new Citizens Initiative possibility in Finland to make changes in legislation, put forth law proposals into Parliament. We have had 9 initiatives that have collected the necessary 50,000 supporters online, and that's the threshold that's required for parliamentary process. So we are a volunteer organization that helps these campaigns to prepare good quality law proposals. We help with volunteer lawyers and designing the campaigns and so on. This partly addresses many of the problems we see in the current way of making decisions together. The general mistrust people have for the political and party political system, and the problems that this system has in addressing kind of the big issues that extend the parliamentary term, which in Finland is 4 years, and also the kind of unwillingness or inertia of political parties to tackle the big issues that also extend national boundaries, but the ones that people feel important and something that should be addressed. And also at the same time the problem of kind of power being more and more in the hands of the lobbyists who know how the system works and how to play the system. So kind of the big picture here, where this is a part of the solution, is that the way we make decisions together, how the democratic system works, should also change as we have the new tools available. We're still making democratic decisions in the age of the printing press, although all the other areas of life have changed dramatically in the last 20 years. So the Citizens Initiative in Finland became possible a few years ago, and has changed now how people have power to put things, force things basically onto the parliamentary agenda. There's no pre-registration or pre-censorship of the proposals, and it's all done online. So in practice, people sign these initiatives with their bank IDs or mobile phones online. There's, as mentioned, 9 initiatives so far that have reached the threshold to get parliamentary process, which means that they are processed the same way as government bills in Parliament. One of them has so far been accepted last December when the Citizens Initiative for allowing same-sex marriages in Finland. Finland is the last Nordic country to allow same-sex marriages, and it had to be forced into play by citizens, as the politicians were not eager to put that on the government program. So this is me and some of the core campaigners of that campaign. One One campaign was for copyright reform, which was one of the earlier campaigns and not a very networked one, although the writing of the actual contents of the law proposal was a very open process with more than 1,000 people having a look at the draft as it was being written online before the campaign was launched. But quite a small campaign. It was successful in terms of reaching the parliament, but was rejected by parliament. The campaign for same-sex marriages was a much more kind of crowdsourced effort. There was independent working groups in charge of different aspects of the campaign. And now kind of the next evolution we see is even more decentralized and independent crowdsourced campaigns with this energy campaign to move into totally renewable energy solutions in the near future or medium future in Finland, with massive kind of hundreds of people in different working groups joining the campaign planning already before the campaign is launched, which will be sometime later this year. So this, of course, is related to what Paul Barron was already in the 60s talking about different types of networks. So we see this more decentralized or even distributed way of working with some shared characteristics of how the tools now available, people not knowing each other but connecting via social networks and kind of having a new way of working together where they don't try to hold on to the power but distribute it as early as possible, delegating and working together. So that's a very interesting way of seeing how things can be done on a massively distributed scale without much money at all. Most of these campaigns have been working totally without any budget. So the project I'm working on at Forum Virium Helsinki is an EU-funded project called Decentralized Citizen Engagement Technologies. You can sign up to the newsletter at decentproject.eu, where we're working on the new tools that this kind of work online requires. So looking at, for example, these kind of questions in our kind of use case. How to help these people who are the initial organizers of these campaigns and how to scale those up. So this kind of cooperation, and this is how it ties into, I think, open data. Whenever you talk about participation and democracy or crowdsourcing, you have to have a common language. For example, this kind of framework where you need to identify whether you're talking about involving citizens in the very early stages or a specific later stage. Usually the decision-making, step 5 in this framework is the official decision-making in the citizens' initiative that happens in the parliament as it has traditionally taken place, but all the earlier phases can be crowdsourced. But this same works on any level of government or any level of citizen participation. And whenever you involve citizens in any of these steps, it's important to explain how input in one stage will feed into the next stage. That's the most typical way of making a mistake in involving people, not planning this openly ahead. And the last step, transparency, assessment, accountability, also feeds into kind of the next cycle. So when you have open data about how things are currently working, people can then frame the issues that need tackling next. As regards open data, I see 3 values. In addition to what I've been now talking mostly about, the democratic values of transparency and accountability, of people being able to participate, and of course kind of the notion of publicly or tax data that has been produced with tax money being the ownership of the taxpayers. There's also two other value drivers, which are the kind of euro savings that the public sector can make by increasing efficiency, for example, through improved procurement and other means, identifying cost savings in different levels of the public organization by just opening up data. And then of course the business opportunities that were talked about in the previous presentation. Building totally new services, but also enriching existing services with open data. Some things, examples of what we're doing in Finland regarding open data. Last year I was coordinating this, one of the longest running open data innovation competitions in Europe. This year it will be the 7th year in a row, Apps for Finland. Last year had some 140 submissions of ideas, visualizations and applications of open data. We will be expanding that this year. The city of Helsinki has been the front runner in Finland for opening up municipal data. For example, all the city decision-making data on all levels, not only the city board and the city council, but also all the subcommittees and boards, is now open in structured format in an API. So no longer only in PDFs or needed to scrape from web pages, but in an API where you can get any item on any municipal decision maker's agenda before the actual decision will be made, so that the people will have time to react if needed to those decisions. Also, Helsinki released all the procurement data for previous years, so that you can see which unit in the city bought for what euro amount from which supplier, so that you can drill down and see what the money is being used for. Helsinki also has a movement now to move into a mobility as a service model where people could subscribe as they subscribe, for example, to a mobile operator plan. Currently, they could subscribe to a mobility plan where you can have a combination of shared vehicles or usage of shared vehicles and public transportation, other modes of transportation. So you wouldn't no longer need individual cars. And this is, of course, puts a lot of requirements on open data and also my data, people's own data about how they move. For example, Syvyys Navigaattori, which is a civil society project at Open Knowledge Finland, where open source platform where people now, it's being piloted with bicycle riders who are beta testers of the service currently. When they use the application to plan a bicycle route from point A to point B, they at the same time submit their my data into the system anonymously, enriching the usefulness of the platform to all the other users. Because this platform shows you how long, with the color codes, it shows you how long specific routes take. So depending on the weather and any road work or any other issues that might influence the time duration any specific route takes, it would show you that on the map, so you can plan your trip based on not only the physical distance but also the time distance that it would take. And another project is a biodiversity-related project where the publicly gathered data of all of Finland, which is laser scanned data from of the woods, and the whole surface of the country is enriched with other publicly available sources, but then also enriched with crowdsourced data from people who are in the nature and make observations about different forms of biodiversity, so you can combine and enrich that data. But also even allowing anybody to put up drones in the air that then enrich the 3D data that would be then available to everybody. So that's a few examples of what we're doing. I hope I have enough time to answer any questions you might have for related to both the open democracy and the open data, the stuff that we're doing in Finland. Thank you.
Thank you. Warm applause to Jonas. Right. Okay, how do you feel? Anyone wants to raise a hand and ask a question? Yes, please. I will give you the microphone as well so everybody hears you.
Regarding the open citizenship in terms of getting things on the agenda, are there restrictions in terms of, or do the Parliament put restrictions in terms of how much time they'll give available to these citizen-based ideas? Because that's usually the problem, is that you get them to the Parliament and they say, well, not enough time this year or next year.
Well, there's several time distinctions. You have 6 months to gather the 50,000, otherwise it lapses. If you manage to gather the 50,000, you have then, I think you again as a campaigner have then 6 months time to decide when you want to put it into Parliament. The Parliament doesn't have a kind of a hard-coded time when it needs to process it, but there's agreement within Parliament that they should be processed without unnecessary delay and get some kind of response. I think I don't remember what the time period was, but it's a valid question, because now with the elections coming in April, and there's still a few on at least one initiative now that hasn't been processed in the committee, and it's a realistic threat that they might not process it in time to end up in a vote. That initiative being the one, because Finland has two official languages, Finnish and Swedish, and this initiative is about abolishing the mandatory Swedish from schools. Currently you have to learn 2 languages in school.
Another one, please. Okay, here. Wait for me.
Transparent Helsinki. The question is it publicly available all expenses of Helsinki city fathers for organizing public transport in Helsinki city?
You mean the costs of organizing public transport?
Yes, the cost justifying the price of ticket.
Yes, I think that should all be public data. It's the public transport is organized by a joint public body that is working the whole metropolitan area. But that's a public body, so it should be publicly available. But at least their budgets and everything is publicly available, and if they don't publish something, that's all available through freedom of information requests at least.
Thank you.
Okay. Another one? Do I see any hands? Okay. Jonas, maybe one quite personal one from me, if I might ask. Now, Finland is rather famous for startups and dealing with open data, and Finland has one of the highest transparency indexes in the world, and the same goes for the freedom of speech and freedom of press. Now, would you elaborate on what drives that, and can any of these experiences can be translated to the rest of the EU. Now, there is a reason why you are succeeding with the open data and with the transparency.
Well, I think there's both historic and then current reasons why it seems to be going relatively okay. I guess the kind of furthest back historic reason is that when we were still part of Sweden in 1700s, I think it was 1766 when the first Public Records Act in Finland, Finland was enacted, the first one in the world. That was the first kind of Freedom of Information Act ever, and that kind of has the still to this date influence that people have the mentality if something is a public record, if it's public information, you have access to it, and still today now the current and previous governments had in their government program now open data specifically mentioned, and there's big both political and buy-in and also on the civil servant side, which in Finland is very strong. It's very civil servant-led kind of decision-making or preparation system, but there's also seems to be buy-in in the civil servant side. Of course, coming from more the civil society side, we work at different, and with startup, being a previous startup entrepreneur, it's kind of working with two different clock speeds. Civil society and entrepreneurs want things to happen now or maybe next week, but then on the government and civil service side, it of course takes months or years to get things done, which is kind of, that's where some of the friction then comes from.
Right, let's thank Jonas. Thank you. Great presentation and the Finnish experience. I'm watching my cell phone with a Twitter application, and I see nice tweets, for example, from Henny Rash and I McGill, whom we are going to hear today later on. Agris has a nice picture of the audience, but as much as I can see in a picture, he's quite far from here, so you could go a little further, closer to the stage. And we are going further with Ian McGill. Ian McGill, please welcome on the stage Ian. And Ian is a managing director of the SPEN network, and he's going to talk about building a business on the open data. Right, here's your presentation.
There we go, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and F5.
F5.
Yeah. Good.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ian McGill. I run spendnetwork.com, and that's basically a business that uses spending data published by the UK government and tender data from the EU to analyse opportunities for businesses to win business from government, but also to see where government can possibly make savings and improve the way they spend money. Just to help me with the talk that I give now, I just wanted to kind of get a feeling of who's in the audience. Who's here from a business or a company? Okay. And who here is from government? Good showing there. And academia? Great. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I won't impose on you anymore. You can get back to Twitter. So basically, one of the just actually one more question: is anyone here an entrepreneur? Great, good. Yeah, that's really exciting, because I asked this question a couple of times at presentations I've given previously, and silence. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and establish what you might need to do if you were going to start an open data business, and how you might go about that, and some of the things that you can do there, but also what government needs to do to encourage open data businesses. Now, I know that Jorge has spoken at great length this morning about EPSI and the need for businesses to respond to, for EPSI to be implemented properly, for businesses to work. And I'm just going to show you some of the nuances of that, some of the problems that we face getting a business up and running. So here you go. This is really all you need to do to get a startup business working with open data. It's really not very complicated. You need to get some data, and you need to add value to it, and then give a load of it away for free. Because that will bring people into the market, bring people into your solution, and then you convert a small proportion of those to paying customers. And that's, so I'm a bit worried that I'm hitting that. That's actually the way that the business of the internet works. If you think about it, there are kind of two sorts of businesses on the internet. Those that made something that was already happening faster, so click shops, Amazon, iTunes, those kind of things. I was buying these commodities, I now buy them digitally. And the other kind of business is the business around communication, either communicating with other people, so Twitter, Facebook, or communicating with a database. Open data businesses sit in that second category, and you have to have users. So that's the sole goal, that when you're starting up, is getting enough value online for free that people start using your product. And to be honest, it's the bit we're struggling most with. That's the hardest bit. The simple bit is doing this. So let me just go through some of the things. Get some data. I think having heard from Jorge and from Jonas this morning, it's quite clear that if the data isn't already there, and a lot of data is already there, there's going to be a whole lot more coming down the line. It is not a problem getting hold of data. The problem is getting hold of good, reliable, consistent data. And you mentioned that actually some of the problems are going to be, you're going to be asked to pay, or you're going to be restricted on reuse, and there are going to be problems around that coming down the line. We've seen that a lot already, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of that later. I think it's really important to do what you can with what's available now. Use the Freedom of Information Acts that are available in your countries to put people on the back foot if they're holding on to their data. But get some data. I mean, look, this is the Open Knowledge Foundation's Transparency Index page. There is no shortage of data. In many ways, you can get started this afternoon with that data, and you can start to build things that don't exist. One of the things that's really important is what you do to that data to add value to it. So and it's actually the most, how you can create the most value. So what we do is we take data from over 200 different publishers and just put it all in the same format, all in the same place. Now it's really simple. It's not a difficult thing to imagine. It's a difficult thing to do consistently and accurately, but it's not a difficult thing to imagine. So, and the thing is that what we do is we save people a huge amount of effort in doing that work for themselves. So cleanse, link, and augment. I mean, really this should say add value. The real challenge that you have as someone who's running an open data business is how do you take something that is effectively a raw material, the oil, and turn it into petrol? How do you really add value? Now, in some cases, it's just actually casting away the sort of governmental interface that goes in front of working with government, where you have all of these. I mean, has anyone ever, when did, last person to see a tender, anyone see a tender from government recently? Yeah, we're responding to one at the moment. We've got 10 days to respond to one that takes 200, that it was written on 200 A4 pages. And half of the language is for sociopaths. It's impenetrable. It's so frustrating dealing with government. And if you, as a businessman, can take 1/10 of that pain away, someone will pay you. It's very simple. And so if you can add value to the data published by government by bringing categorization, better meaning, better linking, you can create something new. And actually, that's not as hard as it might look. This is OpenRefine. I don't know if any of you know about it. It's a fantastic little tool. It's free. And it links to the Open Corporates API. And you can take a list of companies and link it to Open Corporates for free. But it can do all sorts of other things around cleaning up messy data, interlinking data sets, cross-referencing. Really worth getting hold of. Honestly, with 3 hours on this and the right data sets, you could have a product. It might take you a few more weeks to get a website up and get things sorted, but really, today, starting an open data business is easier than it's ever been. And I was talking to someone on the way in about how difficult 10 years ago it was to really kind of set up a business like this. You had to have servers, you probably needed Dun & Bradstreet or some other paid entity to give you closed data, and it would be really difficult. Now I can have a Google server running a Postgres database with 6 million rows in it in 6 hours. It's not difficult. It's cheap, and it's generally, the barriers to entry are coming down so fast, it's unbelievable. And that creates challenges of their own, because that means there are new competitors coming up all the time. So this is the bit that so when my wife gets asked what I do, she kind of throws her hands up in the air and she says, well, look, Ian does all this stuff with procurement data and then he gives it away. and there's a kind of rueful bit about giving it away and wondering why we're not richer or something like that, I think. I want you all to imagine a bookshop on the internet in 1994. Imagine what that page looked like. It would have been a front page, perhaps with a picture of the shop on it, and it would have had the name and the address, and it would have had some details about perhaps the proprietor, how long they've been in business, and how you can get in touch with them. They may have even said something about how specialist their collection of books is. And I want you to think now about what a bookshop looks like on the internet. Everything from peer reviews, author reviews, stock listings, and the ability to purchase. Now, if you can imagine what you would have heard from the owner of the first bookshop when you said, really what we want on the internet is the ability to purchase your books, and we want all of your stock data, that person in 1994 would have gone, no way. No way, that's my information, that's my business. If I give you my stock data and I give you my pricing and no one will come into the shop, no way, you're not doing it. And yet we now know that a successful business has to have this competitive, aggressive disclosure process. And it's not immediate. It's taken 10 to 15 years for us to go from a place where we go, okay, here's a business on the internet, to here's a business on the internet with all of its data appearing available to other people. Because we know that by opening up data, we service the customer. The customer is better served by having access to data. And that is the same thing here. Now, we have competitors in my industry. We have some competitors that run closed shops. They effectively run the same business as mine, but they run it closed. And they don't give anything away for free. What are they doing now? Because we exist, they're starting to open up their data, because they know that they cannot compete against an open data mantra where more and more data becomes available for free. And they know that they're forced down this path where people, you either give data away or you don't give data away. If you don't give data away, you die. As a business on the internet, it's that simple. So we have to bring people into our businesses by engaging them with something for nothing to begin with. But that's what we're doing. So you can go to Spend Network now, and you can type in the name of any company that might have traded with the public sector in the UK, and you can find out how much business they did and when. You can also go to spendnetwork.com and search every tender in Europe over the last 5 years using company names, which you can't necessarily do on the TED database. And that gets updated daily. And we're giving all of that away for free. Because we know that the back end is that we gain more revenue from people who say, okay, this looks like interesting data, they can tell me this answer, and then subscribe. So this is the hard bit. You need thousands of users for one customer. So for what ratios do you think Twitter must have in terms of paying customers versus non-paying customers? It's probably in the tens of millions to one. But that doesn't matter because they've got so many non-paying customers that the paying customers more than make up for it. And that's the ratios you've got to think about. You've got to start thinking about giving stuff away to thousands of people in order to get one customer. It's hard. It's counterintuitive. How many bookshop owners would want thousands of people to come through their bookshop and none of them buy anything? And to service them all, and to look after them all, and to make sure they have a good experience and to nurture them, knowing full well that most of them won't become customers. But it's the nature of the internet. And then convert a percentage of those to paying customers. That's about having the right routes in that people can understand, that they can see, that they can make purchases. And it's a problem that we have. We're not doing it well enough. Anyone visiting our site at the moment will probably be able to see that. But you know, it's something we're working on. And really you need to have that route. If I was to have a chat with myself before I'd started this business, it's the one thing that we didn't get, we haven't got right, and we need to get right, which is what is the route that a customer comes through to get to a paid product. And you need to have that right back at the beginning when you start playing around with some data. Here's an example from Open Corporate. There you go, it's simple, basic subscription. Put your details in, your credit card details, £99 a month, that's below most corporate thresholds for spending. Perfect. Away we go. A couple of things that are worth, in our experience, worth mentioning. Focus on accuracy. The first thing that anyone says to us when they want to give us money, when they want to buy information from us, is how good is your data? And how good is it? I'm going to be honest, it's not as good as it should be. But that's not down to us. That's down to our publishers. That's down to the government, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we do everything we can to make it as accurate as possible. And our customers trust us to do that, to work with the limitations that we're given. Use consulting while you grow. If you're starting an open data business, if you're bootstrapping and you haven't gone to venture capitalists and raised millions of dollars, be a consultant, be a good consultant, because that gives you the revenue you need in the interim. And the next thing you need to do is think globally. I run a business that largely sells to UK government and to companies in the UK, and yet why am I here? Because I know that the potential for this is global. And I know that the data we have, especially the European data, but we need to be the strongest force in Europe around procurement data, or we don't exist. And, you know, we have to, that's the goal, that's the challenge we face. So you have to think globally as well. So that's basically my intro to how to start up an open data business. I'm going to mention for the members of for people who work for governments, some of the things that you need to do to nurture open data businesses. And this list of actions, which I'll go through, is fairly obvious, really, but you'd be amazed how difficult it is. So the first one is open up the data. I still find, I still struggle to explain to people who talk to me about the UK as being a place that is, you know, right at the top of the OK Open Knowledge Foundation's rankings as a place that is easy to do business for open data. It is not. It is not because, although the Prime Minister and key members of the Parliament get it and understand it and want it to happen, that hasn't got to every part of government. Too many people in our government either have vested interests to protect their data and they don't want to give it away and they don't want to give up the revenues that they're gaining from data at the moment, or they think it's just some sort of exhaust fume that gets thrown over the wall because they're told to do it and they don't care about it and it's not going to get used anyway. And it feels like at the times I fight a one-man challenge to get people to cherish their data. So this isn't just about opening up the data, it's about making it good data, making it trustworthy. Whatever you do, don't do this. This was the sale of the public address file that was part of the Royal Mail sell-off, and an act of gross stupidity and basically economic and intellectual vandalism that was visited upon our country by one minister in an act of the most gross stupidity ever. In doing this, we got the company DHL that bought Royal Mail paid, I think, 6 billion. Some of that was 2 billion, of which was down to the postcode address file. But in doing so, we lost thousands of new businesses. We lost thousands of jobs, and we lost the chance to own our own future. And really, this is, we see it happening, I'll mention vested interest later, but we see it happening where government seems to create product using taxpayer funding to generate information and then sell it off as if it belongs to government and not the people. I mean, I'm not hugely politically motivated in my actions, but I am disgusted at this idea that government can use our money to generate something for our benefit and then sell it for their benefit. It doesn't seem conducive, and it's extraordinary that politicians then complain that they're not regarded with in such high esteem when they act like this. I should also mention that, the experience of Jorge's experience in Austria, if you know the story of the experience that he has had, I'm full of admiration for the work that he has done and the grace and I don't know, dignity with which he has continued to pursue EPSI and You know, his business was basically, his livelihood was threatened by the Austrian government, who acted in no better than thugs, frankly. And it can happen. And people who do that should hang their heads in shame. The reality is that this data belongs to the people. It does not belong to governments, and it should be open. And we should work hard to make sure that it is. I will go on. I'll get off my soapbox, that cheery note for getting angry. But does anyone know the expression dog fooding? Right, okay. It's an expression used by developers to say, look, when we develop our product, we're actually going to use it. So we actually use the output of our own coding. So if you are designing a project management tool, you might use your project management tool to help build and improve that project management tool. So dog fooding is a notion of using your own, in this context, it's the notion of using your own data, open data for the purpose of running your government. So I'm going to show you an example of one of the spend files that we recently received. You probably won't really be able to see that, but it's a spend file that just has basically a list of companies and no dates and no values. It is useless. I mean, it is worse than useless because actually it draws out time and energy of people like me to have to go back and complain and say, look, this data isn't data, and et cetera, and you have to have that feedback loop to say, we need to resolve this issue. The problem with this is that if the government was using this data, if they had to use this data to make their systems work or to make their am I running out of time or am I?
No, it's fine. I'm just losing a little on Hall effect.
Right, okay. So if government was actually using this data to make their systems run, it would be good. It would be useful data because it's tested in a live environment by the people who are producing it. And it stops becoming something like food waste that gets thrown over the wall and goes, oh, well, Ian, you deal with that. No, use the data you produce. Use it in your businesses. Use it to do the work of governing better. And you will produce better data. And if anyone from government can take away one thing from my talk today, this is it, dog food. I went to a meeting actually recently with some of the owners of the biggest public sector data owners in the UK, and I bought them all a tin of dog food. And I said, look, use your own data for your own businesses because then our data gets better. So that's deal with the embarrassment. This is one of my favorite things, that whenever the question of opening up some data comes along, everyone goes, that sounds like a really good idea, and then they scurry away into corridors and they come back and they go, yeah. Because they went and looked at the data that they were going to open and they started finding things in it that they didn't necessarily like. And it's a really painful moment when you go, well, actually, should I make that open? So we've got, this is an example of one council in the UK who spent 10,000 euros on cake in 1 year. Now, cake I know the UK is expensive, but 10,000 euros on cake is a lot of money, and I don't know why. We don't know why this is there. But that's the sort of thing that's going to happen when you open up data. Big deal. Deal with it. There is probably a very good reason why they bought cakes. I don't know. But you know, there is but if you're embarrassed by your data, then maybe there's something that you need to do to prevent this happening again, not preventing the data being released in the first place. And I've got a couple more, but basically fight vested interests. EPSI is a beautiful piece of legislation. It is the most important thing that is happening in Europe at the moment, unsurprisingly, because I'm an open data enthusiast, but genuinely, it is the chance for us to make a better future for our children. It is a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity to really do good things, to make the world a rounder place, and it is so simple. And yet we're already seeing in the UK that the government companies are suddenly deciding that they don't have public sector information, so the Act doesn't apply to them. And these are the things that, if you're in government and you're fighting for open data, there will be hundreds of your colleagues sitting here, sitting around thinking, how can I avoid the consequences of EPSI? Or how can we still hold on to this? Or how can we stop people reusing our data? And I would say to you, wake up every morning and fight them with every fiber of your being. Because we have a future that can be about all data being open and our children turning around to us and saying, why do you bother to describe it as open data? You know, not having to make that definition is the future we can fight for, rather than having a closed world that we currently have. Final thing is, does anyone know this expression, buy coals from Newcastle? It's an expression in the UK because coal was mostly mined in Newcastle in the northeast. So the idea that they would be buying, that in Newcastle you would buy in coal was an anathema because they had a surfeit of it at the, after the war. So what we're really saying, one of the problems we face is that we go to government and government turn around to us and say, you're selling our own data back to us. And I would say to you is yes, good, because I've made it better. I've cleaned it up. I've turned it into something useful. So if you do that in the first place, then I can focus on getting on with the rest of the job of making it even more useful or analyzing it. But since you can't, you're going to have to buy the data that I'm selling back to you. But I would encourage government to buy their data back from people who are cleaning it and turning it into something useful and using that data, because that way you create jobs and you get the best out of that data and you improve the feedback loop. So find small businesses working with your data and pay them. It's a good investment to make. And then finally, be patient. Jorgen mentioned some really clear problems that startups face around not knowing where the data is, not knowing what the sort of quality of the data is, how you might handle the data, what licensing terms. Really, data has got to, as an entrepreneur, I looked at our data for over 18 months before I was prepared to even start to think about starting a business on the back of it. That meant that I had to see that it was consistently being produced and that it was broad enough and it wasn't just going to fade away before we would build a business on the back of it. So you have to be patient. I know that what happens is that the minister turns around and says, go on, we'll open up this data, and then about 6 hours later he says, or she says, have any businesses used it yet? Have we got any more startups? How many more jobs have we created? 6 hours after it's released. It doesn't work like that. You have to be patient. It is a long-term investment, but it is the most beautiful investment you can make. This is the most important way of changing our society. And I'll finish with some words that really are a complete rip-off from Gavin Starks, the CEO of the Open Data Institute in London. He said, our cities in Europe face the biggest growth in the next 12 years. We've got to find 1 million new homes for Londoners. The challenge we face is difficult enough. I shake at the thought of facing that challenge without open data. If we want to solve the challenges of society for today, but also for tomorrow, we need open data. So I'd encourage you to release data and make sure that businesses can fly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Now some questions, please. Before we dismiss for the coffee, maybe you should earn it and ask some questions, no?
Come on, I was rude enough to some people that someone
sort of
must have something to say.
Nice social way. But let us take a look from the business point of view. Now we can embrace the government to use such techniques, and we can tell them about the benefits and all. But I have a feeling that the businesses and the governments are just drifting along and not expecting one each other to move and put the first steps, etc. Do you see any methods of pushing this further, like proactive ones?
Yeah, I think it's the problem is that this is a long-term investment.
Oh yeah.
And if you're in a big business, you know, and I know we're sponsored by IBM, and that's the fact that that's happening is a really good thing because someone is waking up to the opportunities here. But most large businesses, if you're in there and you say, right, I want to make an investment using open data, and they go, right, you've got 4 quarters to make a profit. That's probably what you'll get. That's the conversation you'll get. That's really hard. You know, government can release data, but until it gets used, no one really senses it. I mean, I had the Cabinet Office speaking to me yesterday. They sent me an email saying, do you know anyone who's made any savings from using your data? And the irony is that the savings that are coming are from people publishing better, not from actually using the data yet. And it's driving me up the wall. So yes, there is a drift, but there is an answer. The answer is very simply to incubate startups. There are kids in bedrooms who are using computers in ways that I can't even imagine. And they are going onto Google and firing up servers and throwing millions of lines of data against millions of lines of other data, like Hadron Colliders, to come up with meaning. And we should be supporting those people to do good work and to get rich. And it's not a lot of money.
Okay, that's a nice note. Okay, if any of you has got the question, please use the Twitter or raise your hand. But now I would like to thank Ian. Big applause. And before we dismiss for a coffee, I would like to give a souvenirs to the speakers we had this morning. Please, Ian. Yes, applause, please. And for Jonas and Georg as well. Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The first part, now we can dismiss for the coffee break, and the coffee break will be served right here next to these 2 doors. And we should be back at 1 or 12. No, 11 sharp. Thank you very much. Brief coffee break.